Table in those days, Howard Hughes playing high-stakes poker with Joe Kennedy, Doris Duke, the world's richest woman, maybe A.P. Giannini, the man that starts the Bank of Italy and becomes the Bank of America. I mentioned Joe Kennedy. His son John Kennedy was a guest here when he was a young man. He was doing research up at Stanford. He was here. Scientists, Edwin Hubble was here, the man they named the telescope after. Writers like H.G. Wells, the man that wrote The Time Machine, War of the Worlds. George Bernard Shaw, Aldous Huxley. Movie actors and actresses were here. Errol Flynn walked on these teakwood floors while he was kind of what? The Russell Crowe, Johnny Depp of that era. David Niven, a frequent guest, kind of the Hugh Grant of that era. Cary Grant here quite a few times, kind of the George Clooney of that era. Jimmy Stewart, kind of the Tom Hanks of that era. Let's see who else. Dolores Del Rio, kind of the Angelina Jolie of that era. I'm bringing up these analogies because people like Leonardo DiCaprio and Ben Stiller and Steven Spielberg and Hannah Montana and Justin Timberlake and who knows who, Tiger Woods. These folks would be invited to the hilltop. People like them. Hearst was a newspaper man. These people always had a story that surrounded them. Along with these people, the newspaper boy that sold the most subscriptions, he and his family got a free week up here. Servicemen that were on leave, relatives that worked on the hillside, they were always invited up here. Hearst had 90 different companies, thousands of employees, so lots of social and business meetings up here. So lots of regular folks rubbing shoulders with the rich people. Maybe you're sitting here and you're talking to Clark Eagle about his new Civil War movie that he's just starring in, Gone with the Wind. Had Gone with the Wind played in this movie theater after Atlanta. It played here before it went out to the public. Other movies premiered here also. Wizard of Oz played in this movie theater that we're going to be in a little while before it was out to the public in Hollywood, New York. Disney was a guest here. We do have stories that perhaps Snow White and Seven Dwarfs also premiered here. Questions as I keep talking?
The tapestries?
Yeah, that's a great question. Peter Paul Rubens' religious theme over on this side. Jordan, or a mythological theme on that side. Neptune creating the horse for mankind. Hearst was not a religious man. He was not a Catholic. He considered himself a Christian of no specific denomination. Only went to church 2 times that he knew of, Episcopalian, to be baptized and married. The large tapestries on the east and the west walls, those tapestries and this large mantle in front of me, Hearst got these, and he told the architect, I need these pieces to fit in this room. Now, tapestries is how you told the news 500 years ago. These are Flemish tapestries, and these are stories about Scipio Africanus, a general in the Roman army in about 200 years BC, and these are stories of him defeating Hannibal, a general in the that worked for the Carthaginians from North Africa, the Iberian Peninsula, and they were stories about him. And these are designed by Giulio Romano, who was a student of Raphael, and these are the original tapestries, the copies hanging in the Louvre. What's the Punic War? The Punic War was Rome against the Carthaginians. Who controlled the Mediterranean? Who controlled the world? In the Second Punic War, there were 3 Punic Wars. They went on for 150 years. The Roman Empire was fighting that war and other wars at the same time. These were battles where 70,000 men were going to battle against each other. History repeats itself all the time. Okay, so Hearst contacts the architect. He says, I had this large mantle. It's 500 years old, French, the 3rd home it's been in. And these large tapestries. He says, I need this room to fit this. So the architect, Julian Morgan, takes a 500-year-old Italian hand-carved walnut ceiling and spreads it out. The vertical, the horizontal electricity put in by the unsung heroes of this hillside, the artisans and the craftsmen that put everything together for Hearst. More questions, my friends? Yes. This is a 200-year-old English prayer book. His collection. That big giant book over there, a 300-year-old illuminated chant book from Spain, found in Mexico. Illuminated chant book. They didn't give out 30 choir books 300 years ago. They opened up one big book, and priests would stand up, and there was illuminated notes of words. Priests would actually stand up from choir stalls. These are 400 years old, 500 years old. On this side, they're Italian. The architect just used them as walls in here, wainscoting. Hearst didn't want you to sit on these. These are part of his collection. These are things that art dealers around the world say, we have a cathedral coming down. Do you want to buy this or use that? And carved. They didn't have things with machines in those days that did that. Hand carved. You got to think about the family or generations of families that worked on this. What they were in a cathedral for hundreds of years. Eventually in storage in New York, in Europe, in New York, LA, at the bottom of the hillside, and eventually brought it forward. Now Hearst would come down from this little door on this side. His elevator is over there. He's up 2 stories in his Gothic suite with his girlfriend. They come down at 8:30. She goes over and plays cards or dominoes or a new board game that dealt with real estate and investment called Monopoly over there. And Hearst, he would love to talk about his art. Is there anything more you would ask him about in here before we go into the next room? Yes. Because the artisans and unsung heroes in 1920 that put this together for Hearst, they make these. These are 1920s, the copy of these that are 500 years old. Well, it's a door because we're going into the dining room. This is a room we're going to go into. So guess what? This room is Renaissance in style. We're going to go back in time in the dining room. Gothic. Gothic, I want you to think of Harry Potter.
Allora, volete di nome?
One-third of the population died from the Great Plague. So everybody started praying. So the architecture started going up also. The tops of the windows, the 600-year-old French mantelpiece, the tops of these choir stalls, looked in here, they're Spanish, 650 years old, pointing towards heaven. Now usually in a Gothic room you would have stained glass, but they knew it was too dark in here with stained glass. They wanted the blue sky of the day and the stars at night to come in. That's why they put these banners and flags up. The young man said, how come there's not an American flag there? Which is a good point. Hearst, even though he had English heritage, he was a big American, when we put it that way. These flags represent different districts of Siena, Italy. There's a festival that's gone on there for over 1,000 years called the Palio della Contrada. A big festival boils down to 2 horse races. Each horse race 90 seconds long, has a fever pitch for the World Cup and the World Series. Whoever wins the horse race, you get bragging rights and your flag gets raised. Did you see the last James Bond movie, Quantum of Solace? After the driving scene, he's running around after a bad guy and there's a bunch of horses. That was the Palio della Contrada. He was running through them. Hearst would usually sit right here. Mary Davies across from him. The guest of honor on either side. Maybe it's Amelia Earhart or Charles Lindbergh, Will Rogers, Jean Harlow, Harpo Marx, who knows. Your name, what you're having for dinner, and the movie that you would see after. Now, David Niven said it was pretty much man eating steaks, baked potatoes, salad, and dessert. Dessert, usually vanilla ice cream made every day. And apparently, the ketchup, that's the only thing Hearst didn't put ketchup on, was vanilla ice cream. You know, this was a running cattle ranch in those days, as it is today. So they had all kinds of cuts of beef. They had all kinds of, they had poultry farm, you know, chickens, pheasants, ducks, turkeys. They had all the seafood they wanted, 1,000 fruit trees, herb garden, vegetables. They were very self-sufficient. David Niven has another great quote about drinking here. You know, you could get an incredible glass of wine. Downstairs, a wine cellar, over 7,000 bottles dating back 300 years from all over the world. You get a beer here. You get a drink, but Hearst did not want you to come to the hillside just to get drunk. If the main amount of hard liquor in your suitcase was taken away for the weekend. If you were overly drunk, you'd find your bag packed. So David Niven's quote was that the wine was memorable, but it flowed like the flu. Questions, my friends, about anything in here as we wander? This thing? This is a mace. M-A-C. Nebuchadnezzar in this tapestry right here, the story of Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel. Or caveman holds a club, a symbol of power. At one time, Hearst had one of the world's largest private collections of silver. And I can say the same thing about tapestries and Persian rugs. But this is the youngest piece of silver we have in this room, 105 years old, from Dublin, Ireland. The other silver from Mexico, Spain, Belgium, England, and France also. My friends, not a Gothic ceiling. Hearst added, it's a Renaissance ceiling, another 500-year-old Italian ceiling called the Saint ceiling. Hearst added to because if I find a Gothic ceiling, you guys can just rip that out. Yeah, question? That is an entertainment center up there. Now, I don't know specifically who ever played up there. You know, what kind of music would you have thought in here? Really, violins and symphonies and that sort of thing? Guess what his favorite kind of music was? Country western. You got Roy Rogers and the Sons of the Pioneers. Now, by the way, these choir stalls you see all around, you see those tiny little seats? Think 600 years ago, priests are standing up in Mass. They are not allowed to sit down. 3 hours, they're exhausted, tired. They have these long gowns on. Little cheater seats, they're called mercy seats. Looks like they're standing up and they're sitting down. So let's head into the morning room, spelled M-O-R-N-I-N-G. Stories of why those cherubs are on there, and I don't know which one is true. So there's a lot. Now those other ceilings were Italian. This ceiling, Spanish pine, 500 years old, and that's 500 years of dirt and grime on there. Folks, on this side and over there, look up over here. See that red and yellow? That's what's underneath 500 years of grime. A company just got a contract to clean this ceiling. This is called the morning room because it faces directly east. And in that dining room, there was only 22 seats. Average guests here might be 12 or 15, but sometimes big parties of 100 people out there in the courtyard. That's where they would eat and that's where they would dance. So after dinner, you're in here, you're talking to Clark Gable about his new movie, Gone with the Wind. And there's a beautiful blonde next to him, his girlfriend, Carol Lombard, eventually his wife. She's famous for being a pool shark. So maybe she says, hey Lorenzo, let's go into the billiard room for gaming pool. His girlfriend Miriam, and the architect Julian Morgan. In fact, when he ran to be president once, I think he wanted to be king, William Randolph Hearst. He ran on some of his thoughts for equal opportunities for women, better child labor laws, and he thought income tax was ridiculous. So, Brunswick tables, 1930s. American standard billiards, French billiards, a game called carom. 1930s here, but this ceiling made before Christopher Columbus sailed the blue. So So the men that made this ceiling didn't even know the earth was round. We have a 5-year, $500,000 contract that is cleaning this ceiling right now. The scaffolding's out during the summer because of crowds. It costs $500,000, and that money is raised by a nonprofit group called Friends of Hearst Castle. They have expensive dinners here and that sort of thing. They had an eBay auction about a year and a half ago. Spend a night at Hearst Castle, swim in the Roman pool, and husband and wife spent $26,000 to do that. So those are the ways that we raise money for projects like this. Tapestries, they are not rugs that have been put up on the wall. An analogy that was made to me, which I will pass on, consider a movie producer. He's the guy that knows the people in the studios with the money. He hears about a good story, he talks to the writer, he gets the screenwriters, a cast, a crew together. It takes him 2 or 3 years to make a movie. A merchant is much the same way as the movie producer. A merchant knows the people that own the chateaus or the villas. It's ordered. The merchant goes to an illustrator and gets a drawing done. That drawing is called a cartoon. That is where that word originated. The cartoon is brought back to people that work on the loom. It takes 2 or 3 years to make a tapestry and has to tell a story. This is Franco-Flemish, 500 years old, in the mill floor design. That means 1,000 flowers. It's called the Hunt of the Stag. It's early morning. The men have their early morning beards. There's dew on the leaves. The man's blowing the hunting horn. The hunt is on. The stag's on its hind legs. This dog, shown all vicious, ready to be let off his leash, tear into that stag. The other dogs, probably on their first hunt, getting their first scent. William Randolph Hearst loved this. Maybe 6 men, maybe he thought it was he and his 5 sons. He spent $100,000 on this in 1928. What happened in 1929? The great stock market crash. The world's going broke. He keeps spending money. His accountants say, Mr. Hearst, stop spending money. He's redoing estates, building a 110-room bedroom house for his girlfriend down in Santa Monica. He keeps spending. By 1937, he's $125 million in debt. That's when they sell much of his art, sell much of his property, and they start making decisions for him about his businesses. I think much like Donald Trump today, I don't think Hearst lost his lifestyle when he got financial difficulty. And he will get back in the money. During World War II, which brought us out of the Depression, right? He sells a lot of advertising and a lot of newspapers. When he dies in 1951, he's worth about $200 million. And 1951 money and today's money, that's probably billions. He dies in 1951 in Beverly Hills. At 88 years old, he lived a long